Good morning. Today is the 12th of Cheshvan, the 27th, right? 27th or 26th? 27th of October. We're up to the 6th reading. And 6th reading has a very interesting topic. It's not the first topic somebody would think of. But it was a series of classes a few years ago on conflicts and dilemmas. When a person can be conflicted and he can be in a dilemma. And they're not exactly the same thing. To be conflicted is more, as we'll see, a masculine trait. Even if a woman is conflicted, she has two different leanings. She leans here and she leans there. Then it's solved by the masculine traits in the soul. And when you have a dilemma, which is, usually people talk about a moral dilemma, and you have some kind of two values that conflict. It's the values that conflict. It's not in me. It's not that I'm leaning here and leaning there. It's that I have two values that are conflicting. So that's a more feminine trait. You need a more feminine trait to solve that. So this is all based on a very interesting observation. You can't hear me for some reason. It's all based on a very based on a very interesting observation. So we're starting with the verse now. The Sarai said to Avram, "Look, God has kept me from having children. Come to my handmaid, perhaps through her I will be built up." So she takes Hagar and she frees her from being a servant and gives her to Avram. And she says, perhaps. This word is ulai. And this is the reason that we're talking about this is the first time that this word appears in the Torah. It's the very first time. It sounds like a very important word, maybe, perhaps. But actually we went through a lot of Torah and this word didn't appear yet. Meaning that Sarah was the first person to be in conflict. She was the first person to have a moral dilemma, let's call it. First person to not know, what should I do? What's the right thing to do? Ulai banim, maybe, perhaps, I will be built up from her, and maybe I won't. In the end, what happened? It didn't work. She was in a dilemma, and she decided one way, but it didn't work. But what we're saying is that you can't live your life stuck in between. You have to make up your mind at some point. So she made up her mind. The fact that she's the first person that is entertaining a dilemma like this and solving it, deciding that she has to solve it in some direction and take a step forward. So that we learn from that it's a feminine trait. So let's read a little bit from Wonders about how this all played out. So dilemmas are one of the most important words today in game theory. So Sarah was in a dilemma. She was barren, had no child, and did not even have a womb. 10 years since they had come to the land of Israel, they had no children. If she had asked Abraham what to do, this dilemma might have been too great for him. That's why she's the first one who's contending, who's tackling a dilemma. So a lot of people won't even think about the dilemma. It's not, I don't want to go into that place. And what happens if it's like this? What happens if it's like that? They don't even want to enter into it. But she was able to. So there are 6 instances, altogether 17 times perhaps in the entire Bible. So it's not a very common thing that somebody says perhaps. It's 17 times not in the Bible, 17 times just in the 5 books of Moses. And here, she says this 6 times. She says this once, and then Abraham picks up from her, and when in next week's Parsha he goes to debate with God about Sodom and Gomorrah, he says the word 6 times. Like he learned from her. That's the understanding here. This is a different way, I hope you understand, this is a different way of learning Torah. You look at what words appear, and then you say, okay, where did they show up later? Because one person it's like seeds the other. It's like a thought that passes, and you see that somebody was successful in it, maybe, let's say, and they say, maybe I can try it. In this case, Abraham doesn't say about himself. He throws the dilemma at God. He says 6 times, maybe you'll find 10 righteous people. Maybe you'll find, he started from 50, really, maybe there's 50, and then there's 40, maybe, and he keeps going down. Every time that he says maybe, perhaps, it's like trying to throw a dilemma on God. And then maybe God has to decide. Maybe he'll decide the way that I want him to. But it's a very interesting concept. She was the first one to entertain this state of mind that I'm in a dilemma, and she gives it to Avram. There's a very beautiful gematria here that when you take both types of dilemma and conflict together, you get da'at. In Hebrew, there's a way to write conflict and dilemma. That's how we say it in Hebrew today, in modern Hebrew. Together they equal to da'at. In a certain sense, that is what consciousness needs to deal with all the time, and not to be afraid of them. So, but Sarah, with her use of the word perhaps, also resolves the dilemma. Unlike Abraham's 6 perhaps, which lead to no resolution, and then nothing happens. Sarah, with the extra understanding given to a woman over a man, with the abundance of the divine spirit within her, decided what to do. Give my maidservant to my husband, even though it could backfire. There are a few more times that women used this tactic in the Torah, but the precedent was set by Sarah. She has no precedent to learn from, and her decision comes entirely from her divine spirit. So perhaps means maybe yes, maybe no. There's a real dilemma here. Perhaps through her I will be built up. And even this possibility is strong enough to decide to act in an exceptional way, one that is not standard. So this is very interesting, that what the dilemma does is it moves you into new territory. Why are dilemmas important? Because they take you into a new space that you weren't able to even think of before. So dilemmas are like, we talked 2 days ago about understanding being related to space. So the woman has this ability to enter into this dilemma space, this new space that she hasn't seen yet, the mind hasn't seen yet, and the consciousness grows by considering the different options. Later we see that almost the entire Torah Shebaal Peh, almost the entire oral Torah is based on this concept. That I'm constantly thinking, what if like this? What if like that? I keep thinking about the two options, weighing them all the time. I have to think that this is a new thought, especially when I think about moral dilemmas. Especially when I think about that, then it really pushes me to develop. So what's the relationship between a conflict and a dilemma? He gives a beautiful explanation. Let us use a linguistic illusion. The Lubavitcher Rebbe's first campaign was tefillin. One of the allusions to tefillin in the context of a campaign is in the verse describing the tribe of Gad. He will tear off the arm and the scalp. Meaning, they were great warriors, and with one blow of their sword, they could take off both the head and the arm. How do you do that? So they say that they used to cut like this. We're talking about warfare 3,000 years ago. So what is this saying? This verse clearly alludes to tefillin, which are put on the scalp and on the arm. So now if we want to sublimate it, we want to turn it something for us. So God has the power to connect both to the head tefillin and to the arm tefillin at the same time. The word for scalp, how do you say scalp in Hebrew? In this verse, it's kodkod. And kodkod, he says, is a conflict dilemma. It's like how kad. It's like saying these two words. So what's happening here? What are they doing? That God is solving dilemmas and conflicts. He has this power to slice through it, to give you like a real understanding that this is where you need to stand, and you can't stand there. That's his power. So what is needed to solve dilemmas? From the first dilemma, which was posed and solved by Sarah, we can surmise that one needs the extra measure of understanding, like we said, that was given to women over that which was given to men. If women are good at solving dilemmas, then we can also think that maybe men are good at solving conflicts. Apparently, inner conflict is more closely associated with emotions, while dilemmas are more intellectual in nature. Now you would have thought maybe if it's like that the man would be more intellectual, but this is a very important thing. That what do you mean when you say that someone is more inclined to be intellectual? What you mean to say that they're usually in the space of the intellect. But the dilemma is not in the space of the intellect. Then the dilemma is tearing the intellect apart. And to put it back together, to decide to do either this or that, is a different trait than being intellectual. It's not exactly the same thing. It's like if you're intellectual, you may be torn by dilemmas. But to solve it, you have to be a woman. The woman has the ability to decide it's this way. That's why in the end, Hashem says to Avram, in all these dilemmas that are posed, you listen to her. Because she knows how to decide on a dilemma, on a moral dilemma. She knows where to go. Whereas you, because you're very intellectual, so on the contrary, your intellect is torn apart. On the other hand, if conflicts are inner conflicts, they're emotional. I'm leaning here and I want to do this and I want to do that. It's a conflict. I can't do both. So if you're an emotional person, if you're more connected to your emotions, you can't solve that. So you're just torn between your two conflicting feelings. And what's an example of a conflict? Somebody said conflict is like a conflict of interest, let's say. That I want to be successful, right? I want to do something for myself. On the other hand, I'm committed here to helping I can't do both at the same time. So I'm torn between them. So who can solve that? So he says somebody who's not too emotional. It's in the emotional realm because I'm drawn here and I'm drawn there. But you have to have like a masculine mentality to come and say, I'm cutting off, that's the idea, I'm cutting off like half the body. I'm pushing this conflict, and so I can handle the conflict of interest better. And here the conflict means that you have to decide. It's not that I'll stay conflicted. In fact, you would say, according to this, that men are morally in a dilemma state. It's hard for them to decide morally, like in the intellect. And women are always more prone to be conflicted. They stay conflicted. There's no easy way to cut off something. And so you need the masculine energy. Again, saying men and women is very generalized. What we mean is that we have a power in ourselves that is masculine, that has the ability to decide between conflicts. And we have a feminine energy that has the ability to decide between dilemmas. So now the end of this is, and we need to finish because that there are, if we now follow this, that's kud, that's conflict dilemma. So it means that in the four worlds and the four letters of God's name, so the Yud is a conflict, the Hey is a dilemma, the Vav is a conflict, and the Hey is also a dilemma. So really what this is coming to is to understand what are the basic conflicts and dilemmas in life. This was all like an introduction. What are the basic conflicts and dilemmas? So the conflict in the world of the emanation is whether to be or not to be, specifically with God. It's an existential conflict. I can't do both, as it were. Am I going to live with God, or am I going to live with myself? It's like I have to decide. It's a conflict. It's like you have to decide what you're dedicating yourself to. It's like and we talked about this yesterday, that the man has a strong affinity to godliness, so he can easily do this. He can easily decide that I'm going to live my life in a godly way, and that anyway will change everything underneath. And that's why we give the mass of religious duty to the man, because he can solve that conflict. The other masculine conflict is, of course, between the good inclination and the evil inclination. That's you always have Yetzirah Tov, Yetzirah. You want to do this and you want to do this, and you have to decide. So you can't do both. You can't stay conflicted. Also, you have to decide. You have to decide: am I going to follow my Yetzer Tov? Am I going to follow my Yetzirah? And as a man, there's this power to cut that in half and decide that I'm only following my Yetzer Tov. It's like a conflict I can resolve. The higher dilemma is what's called, these are the moral dilemmas that people have. There's many moral dilemmas, all kinds of dilemmas now. Like in war, there's a lot of moral dilemmas. So actually, when you put soldiers to decide moral dilemmas, you don't get a good fit. Like, they'll stay in a dilemma. They don't really know what they're doing is right or wrong. In that sense, the Torah is very feminine. That the Torah has a way of helping us cut between moral dilemmas. And then the final one, in the world of action, is everything that's pragmatic. All the pragmatic dilemmas. What's a pragmatic dilemma? That someone who is pragmatic all the time needs to solve problems related on how to act. What actually do I need to do? That's a dilemma. It's not a conflict, because I'm not conflicted in the sense that this is good and this is... It's like a dilemma. These two things, they're okay, both of them. Which one do I choose? How do I choose? So in that sense, women are more practical. Like, able to decide. As we call it, they're multitasking. But really what it is, apparently, is a good ability to decide which one am I going to do. And to prioritize it the right way. Okay, so this is for today. We'll finish here. And just mention one last thing, that this says that both the masculine and feminine energy are both needed to solve these conflicts and these dilemmas. You have to have both. And in a household, you have to think about these things and see who has the better take on how to solve these problems, each different type of problem. Yes, it's a little airy today. It's not as concrete, but this is all based on a whole series of classes that he gave on game theory. So there was a lot of examples, but I don't remember them right now.